Hey guys, and welcome back to another Mystery Monday video on my channel. It has been quite a while since I uploaded my last video, and I don't really have an excuse as to why there's been such a long amount of time in between videos. I just really got caught up in life and haven't been filming lately or doing as much research as I would have liked to. But hopefully now I can get into more of a schedule and get back on track and start uploading more frequently for you guys. But with that being said, I don't want to blab too much at the beginning of this video, so let's just get right into today's case. Beverly Rose Potts was born on April 15th, 1941 in Cleveland, Ohio to her parents Robert and Elizabeth Potts. She was the second child born into this family as she had an older sister named Anita. And Anita and her were about 10 years apart, but that didn't really make much of a difference in their life. They still remained very, very close, and they did stay living together throughout all of Beverly's life, so despite the 10-year age difference, the two girls were quite close. Beverly was described as being a very quiet, timid, and responsible little girl. Now, I think the fact that she was described as being very responsible might be due to the fact that she was scared of getting in trouble. But like many kids do, she did slip up every now and then and did get into some kind of trouble. But overall, she was just a really well-behaved, quiet little girl. Now, something else that I want to mention about Beverly that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on in this case is that she had a very distinctive walk since she was a baby. She walked with her feet facing outwards, and many people would refer to this as a duck walk. Something else in this case that is pretty important is that Beverly was absolutely fascinated with anything to do with the performing arts, and she had grown this fascination from a very, very young age. And because of this, there was actually a festival held in Halloran Park, which was a park that was very, very close to Beverly's home, every single year in the summer. And this was a festival called Wagon, and people would come from all over, and it would just be performing acts, and families would come to the park to watch these performing acts and other kids Beverly's age. And it was just something that she did every single year with her family since she was quite little, because this festival was annual. It did happen every single year. Being 10 years old, Beverly and her neighbor, who was also her best friend named Patsy Swing, decided that they thought this year they were old enough to go to Wagon by themselves. They didn't want any supervision, and they thought that they were old enough to just handle their own and go independently to this festival. But Beverly actually was quite nervous to ask her mother if she could go to this festival alone with any supervision, because she wasn't sure if her mother would say yes. Because like I mentioned earlier in the video, Beverly didn't get in trouble very often. She was a really well-behaved kid. She was super responsible. She always came home on time. But she had actually broken curfew and stayed at Halloran Park way later than her parents had wanted her to on one night, just a couple weeks before Wagon would be taking place. Now, Halloran Park is just a park like everybody has in their cities. During the day, it is super popular and filled with kids and families, and many people go there to just hang out, and it's a super safe place. But in the night, as soon as the sun starts to set, this is not the most favorable place to be. A lot of very shady characters hang out there, and it's just not a very safe place for kids to be once the sun sets. So that was the rule that Beverly had broken. She is supposed to always come home before the sun sets, but on this one occasion, a couple weeks before Wagon, she hadn't come home until after the sunset. So her parents were not very happy with her about that situation. But because Beverly didn't get in trouble very often, and because she was very responsible, especially for her age, her parents decided to allow her to go to Wagon by herself with her friend Patsy, and they even allowed her to stay until after the sun had set once the show was completely over. So on August 24th, 1951, the two 10-year-old girls, Beverly Potts and her friend Patsy Swing, headed out to Halloran Park to watch this festival. Now, they left their house around 7 p.m. and they were on their bikes, but once they got to the festival, they realized that it was quite difficult to move around the festival while having their bikes with them. So seeing as they lived very, very close to the park, they decided to take their bikes home and ended up returning back to the park around 8 p.m. Around 8:30 p.m., the sun started to set and the park started to become a little bit darker, and that is when Patsy told Beverly that she actually had to be home by sunset. So she was now getting ready to leave, and she actually wanted Beverly to go with her, but Beverly was really insistent that her parents said that she could stay till after dark and she could stay until the show was over. Now, this next part that I'm going to talk about is very, very important in this case, but it is also a part of this case that people think is often over-exaggerated or that there was some kind of misunderstanding on Patsy's end. So just keep that in mind while I'm talking about this, but I personally think that this is a key piece of information within this case. Patsy claims that while she was getting ready to leave the park, or while she was already making her way out of the park, she actually turned around to see Beverly standing in the crowd watching the performers on stage. And she said, and I quote, that there was a plump woman standing behind Beverly with her hand on Beverly's shoulder and her other hand holding that of a small child. At this time, while Beverly was at Show Wagon, her family was actually just sitting at home watching baseball. They were waiting for Beverly to come home and tell them how the festival went, and when 10 p.m. rolled around and Beverly still wasn't home, her parents decided to call the Swing household and just ask if they knew where Beverly was. But this is when they were informed that Patsy had been home for quite a while and that Beverly had remained at the park by herself. This, understandably, was enough information to set the Potts family into a frenzy, and that is when Robert Potts decided to gather up some of his friends and neighbors, and they all headed down to the park to search for his daughter. But unfortunately, this search turned up with absolutely nothing, and that left the Potts' only hope being to call the police. By the next morning, Beverly's face was plastered everywhere, all over the Cleveland area. There was missing persons posters of her posted absolutely everywhere, not just within the area where she vanished from, but all of the surrounding areas as well. And multiple searches were conducted not only by law enforcement, but also volunteers and her family and friends, but every single one of these searches turned up with absolutely nothing. To this day, Beverly Potts' case remains one of the most popular and well-known missing persons cases in Cleveland, Ohio's history. In September, when school started up again, police decided to interview some of the kids that would know Beverly and some of the kids that went to Beverly's school just to see if they had any information, as Show Wagon was a very popular place for kids to go. A lot of the families hung out there, so they thought that it was possible that maybe some of her classmates or some of the kids that went to her school might have seen something. During many of these interviews, a lot of the children told investigators how they seen Beverly be abducted, how they saw people take her, and a lot of very fabricated and over-dramatized stories that the police just definitely thought were made up by these children. But you have to keep in mind that a lot of these kids were very young, and this was quite a traumatizing event probably for them, but also for Beverly to be getting so much attention because she was missing probably made a lot of these kids want to be involved in the case, even if they had no information about her disappearance at all. So police did believe that a lot of these stories were just made up by these children. One of the instances that was told to police by a very little girl who said that she had seen Beverly being abducted and that she was forced into a green vehicle by two men. And another story that came up a couple times by, I'm not sure if it was the same children or a group of children who had been friends, but another group of children had told police that they seen Beverly being forced into a black vehicle by a group of men. But again, police do believe that these stories were both fabricated and that there isn't really much truth to them. But there was one story that was told to police by a 13-year-old boy that they do believe has some truth to it. This 13-year-old boy told police that he seen Beverly walking towards her house while he was leaving the park after Show Wagon was finished on his bike. Now, when police asked him if he knew for sure it was Beverly and how he knew for sure it was Beverly, he said because you could tell by the way she was walking. Now that is why I mentioned earlier that Beverly did have a very distinctive walk. She walked with her feet facing outwards, similar to a duck walk. And police strongly believe that this sighting was true and that this child didn't fabricate this story. They really do think that this child saw Beverly walking towards her home, meaning that Beverly was abducted somewhere along her walk to her house. That being said, if that account is true, that means that Beverly was abducted just moments away from her home. Now, because this case was so huge and still is to this day, it resulted in her family getting a lot of harassing phone calls and just fake information coming forward to police. And one of these accounts I'm going to talk about is just absolutely sickening. But a man had actually called the Potts home and said that he knew Beverly was safe, he had her with him, and he wanted a large lump sum of money delivered to him to this specific area, and he wanted this money delivered by none other than Elizabeth Potts. But He didn't want the police involved, and if they found out that anybody else was delivering the money or anything like that, he said that something bad would happen to Beverly. But the Potts family did think this through, and they did the right thing, and they called the police and got them involved in this. So a detective underwent kind of like a disguise. He dressed up like Elizabeth Potts and went to meet this person. Now, upon him approaching this man, the man realized that this was a man dressed as a woman coming to meet him, but luckily this detective was fast enough. He chased this man down and was able to detain him, and it turned out that this man had no connection to Beverly's case. He had no idea where she was, and he just wanted the money. And that is just absolutely sickening. Everything about this case is sickening, but that just is absolutely heartbreaking. But besides this information, there has been really no breaks in this case, and there's very little known of what exactly happened to Beverly Potts on that day. One of the main theories in this case is that Beverly was possibly abducted by the woman who Patsy claimed to see with Beverly in the park, with her hand resting on Beverly's shoulder. Now, Patsy said that she hadn't recognized this woman from town, and Beverly was known to be quite timid and didn't really interact with strangers, but was especially nervous around men. So is it possible that she maybe could have warmed up to this woman, not only because this was a woman, but because she had another small child with her? I do feel like it is a little bit more likely that maybe Beverly would have warmed up to her because of this. So is it possible that this woman offered to take Beverly home or tried to lure her somewhere else, and Beverly ended up trusting this woman and went with her somewhere? The next theory in this case is that Beverly was possibly abducted by somebody that she knew. Now again, Beverly was a very shy little girl. She didn't like to interact with people, but especially not strangers. So is it possible that somebody else that she knew was at Wagon, and they either offered to drive her home or lured her away from the park some other way and had a darker motive? I think that these theories are both two very strong possibilities, because obviously Beverly trusted somebody enough to leave the park with them. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the suspects that were looked at throughout this case, but besides that, there really isn't too much to say about it. Nobody really knows what happened that day. Nobody has any idea where Beverly is, and this case is just completely cold. In 1955, a man named Harvey Lee Rush came forward to police and told them that he had murdered Beverly Potts. He said that he lured her away with candy to a bridge, and that is where he had killed her. But he also said that he killed her in the year of 1952, which obviously is not the year that Beverly went missing. It later came out that this man was actually extradited from Cleveland and was using the false confession to try and get his way back in there. So there was no truth to what he was saying, and this was all just a completely false confession. In 1972, two Cleveland detectives received a tip from a local attorney saying that his client's brother might have confessed to murdering Beverly Potts. The brother was brought in for questioning, and he said that he did used to live very close to the park and was known for going down into the park and stealing and molesting young girls. And he said that he had a vague memory of one of these young girls claiming that her name was Beverly. The detectives who did interview this man did believe that he was responsible for the disappearance of Beverly Potts, but when he was brought in, the county prosecution decided that they didn't think that they had enough evidence to convict him of anything. In 1988, a man by the name of William Henry Redmond was convicted for murdering another very young girl in 1951 in Pennsylvania. And while in prison, he actually confessed to the murder of 3 other young girls, but when police questioned him about Beverly Potts' disappearance, he didn't give them any information. In early 2000s, a man by the name of Brent Larkin started to receive letters from an elderly man who claimed that he was on his deathbed. Now, Brent actually worked for a newspaper company and was a reporter, and this man who was claiming to be on his deathbed said that he wanted to make a deathbed confession to the murder of Beverly Potts. This man said that he was going to turn himself in on August 24th, 2001, but when this day came and went and that never happened, Brent received another letter saying that the reason that he didn't turn himself in was because he was put into a nursing home. This man's identity does remain anonymous, but after police did start to look into this, they do believe that this was just a complete hoax. And the most recent update on this case was in 2015 when the Cleveland Police Department received a phone call from an anonymous caller who gave them a lot of information on the Beverly Potts case. Now, the information that they did give to the police has never been released to the public, but the caller did hang up abruptly, leaving the Cleveland police to turn to social media and just media in general to try and plead with this person to come back and give them more information on the Beverly Potts case. But that never happened. This person never called back, and many people believe that this was also just a hoax. But besides that, there isn't too much else to say on this case. My heart sincerely goes out to all of Beverly Potts' loved ones and anybody who may have been affected by her case, because this is just such a tragic, tragic case. Any cases that involve small children just disappearing or anything like that really just wrench at the heartstrings, but this one in particular, because nobody has any idea of what could have possibly happened to her. That being said, thank you so much for watching my videos. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys!